Hi everybody, I'm Paige Abbott and this is your weekly recovery message. I wanted to tackle the topic of dual diagnoses or concurrent disorders, which refers to somebody who has been diagnosed with addiction as well as a mental health disorder. So depression, anxiety, personality disorder, those sorts of things. The reason that this got brought up is I recently attended a workshop on this topic, and the whole idea of concurrent disorders has always sort of sat very uncomfortably with me because over the last many years of my practice, the only thing I can really determine if people are diagnosed with two or dual diagnoses, even multiple disorders, the only difference in treatment, meaning what they're recommended to do to look after themselves, that looks different if we're just talking about addiction recovery. So for addiction recovery, typical recommendations include biopsychosocial spiritual care, so connection with other people, 12-step meetings, community support groups, individual therapy, self-management techniques like journaling, meditation, physical activity, some sort of relaxation, as well as a spiritual practice, healthy eating, nutrition, drinking plenty of water, that sort of thing. That these are the standard recommendations for people who have addiction and are in recovery, but they also are the standard recommendations for people who are diagnosed with these other mental health conditions. And like I was saying, the only thing I've noticed that's different is the recommendation for medication. So often when people are using this concurrent disorders or dual diagnosis approach, there will be antidepressants or anti-anxiety type medication that are recommended for people to take. And to be honest, I have yet to see an individual who's been diagnosed with these dual diagnoses who has not been quite active in their addiction, but in other ways. So maybe they've come in seeking care for obvious issues related to alcohol or food or drugs or something like that. And even once they've engaged in recovery for that behavior, addiction is a primary and chronic disease, and it impacts all areas of life. So what's often happening is that addiction is still quite active, but it's found a new home. So these individuals likely are still very active in their disease and fueling it, but using other behaviors now. And that may be other substances, but more so what I find starts to happen is people are activating their addiction using relationships. So that could mean dating, that can mean flirting, fantasy, codependency, caretaking, controlling. The list goes on, the ways that relationships can activate addiction. It can also be in the sexual realm, so using things like pornography, masturbation, escorts, prostitutes, that sort of thing to get its hit or its high. Video games, so also social media, technology, using their phones, that sort of thing, as well as food. And it's these critical areas that I find many healthcare practitioners, unfortunately, are not properly assessing or even discussing with their clients. They just assume that if a client came in, they had obvious issues with alcohol and they've stopped drinking, that their addiction issue is in remission or it's quiet. But if they continue to experience emotional difficulty, so maybe some depressive symptoms, or they're anxious, they're fearful, they're worried, then this dual diagnosis business starts to come into play. And I feel that it overcomplicates things. I prefer to leave the lay of the land quite simple, and so I would encourage you, if you do have a dual diagnosis or have been diagnosed with concurrent disorders, what I would encourage you to do is to really step back and look at your overall addiction and recovery approach. And it would be key to really take an honest inventory for yourself, but also with a trusted healthcare provider, sponsor, recovery support, to really look at, is your addiction being activated by other behaviors and in other areas? And to particularly look at the relationship realm, sex realm, food realm, as well as the technology, so video gaming, phones, that sort of thing. These would be very important areas to explore, and then to really look at how you've been taking care of yourself. So I mentioned before the biopsychosocial spiritual approach, that what may be happening is you might be over focusing on one or a couple of these areas, but underplaying others. And I find that the psychological or emotional realm, as well as the spiritual realm, do tend to get downplayed, especially as time goes on. That these are the areas that are most challenging and most uncomfortable for people to explore, but they truly provide the most freedom and benefit if people are looking at them. So this whole dual diagnosis, concurrent disorders thing really doesn't sit very comfortably with me. I'm not saying that if that fits for you, okay, if it's working. However, I think that there's many other things that you could explore to look at your health and well-being, and that's what I would encourage you to look at. That's my perspective. Thanks for listening, and I wish you the best in your ongoing journey of recovery for the week. Bye for now.